Dear viewers, wherever you are, hello and welcome to this new episode of your program Spectra. Hypnosis, hypnotherapy. Might sound familiar. We've heard about hypnosis and hypnotherapy a lot. We've watched a lot of things about hypnosis and hypnotherapy. We've read a lot of stories about hypnosis and hypnotherapy. But what is fact and what is fiction? We've seen hypnotherapy and hypnosis used by witches, by ghouls, by monsters, by magicians, and by doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, etc., etc. So, where's the fine line between the facts and the misconceptions? To delve deeper into the crypts of hypnosis and to know the role that hypnosis plays in healing all kinds of psychological wounds and trauma, I'm really delighted to be accompanied today by a very special guest. I'm accompanied today by Dua Ali, who's a certified clinical hypnotist for post-traumatic stress disorder. Dua, hello and welcome to the program. It's a real pleasure having you with us today.
Hi, Muhammad. Thank you very much for inviting me today. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Likewise, absolutely. So, to start off, can you explain what kinds of childhood or youth trauma are most common in people you see? Even before answering that, can you just simply define for the common viewer the proper scientific definition of a trauma?
So trauma is a stressful event that a child or sometimes an adult goes through. And an event that sometimes the mind or the body, it's too much for the mind or the body to deal with. And that is why in the aftermath of trauma, people might struggle with things like nightmares or flashbacks. And sometimes when the trauma is so deep, sometimes even the mind erases it completely from the conscious memory, but then only for the symptoms to come back to surface maybe after years of the event.
Okay, so having said that, going back to our initial question, what are the most common kinds of trauma that you experience with youth and children?
Usually chronic or complex trauma. Things like domestic violence, for example, whether the child themselves go through the domestic violence
And by
abuse.
chronic here, I mean ongoing, like it's
Yes.
something. Yes.
Yes, like over a prolonged period of time. Abuse, different types of abuse, whether physical, emotional, sexual, or verbal abuse. Also being a witness of domestic violence over a prolonged period of time. So the child, for example, witnessing one of the parents being abused by another parent, whether emotionally or verbally or physically. Um, Other things might be things like prolonged neglect by the parents, abandonment, being rejected by one or both parents. All those are traumatic events that affect us deeply as adults. So when someone or when a client comes to me with symptoms or issues like procrastination or fear of social media or um, loss of purpose in life
Mhm.
or issues with relationships, I know that those are symptoms of traumatic events that they've been through as children.
Now, you talked about several things like neglect, abuse, or loss. How does each one of these affect people differently as they grow up? I know you cannot go so deep, but if you can just give us a brief intro to the effect of things like neglect, abuse, or loss on a
So
child.
So, experiencing Each of these types of traumas can affect, as a child, can lead to physical and mental struggles that affect us later as adults. Children who experience traumatic events may struggle with things as with issues like depression and anxiety when they grow up into adults. They can struggle with emotional regulation, expressing their emotions, and even feeling their own feelings. They might struggle with that as well. They also struggle developing healthy relationships and possibly subconsciously choose to be involved in long-term unhealthy dynamics or unhealthy relationship dynamics. For example, children who go through prolonged neglect from their parents, whether either or both parents, they learn that they are not worthy of love. They learn that they are not loved for who they are, and then they start to learn, they internalize a belief that love must be earned. So they start to do everything to earn their parents' love and attention. Those people grow up to be people pleasers later in adulthood. They neglect their needs and they put others first. They might struggle setting boundaries, or they usually say yes when they mean no, or when they want to say no. Now, for abuse, abuse can lead to a lot of mental health issues, such as depression, anxiety, and it can also lead to memory issues. So, some people, as adults, they might block a full period of their relationship, or don't remember details about that period of their relationship, or that part, sorry, not relationship, sorry, that part of their childhood, because they were exposed to a difficult trauma during that period of their childhood.
Can we put bullying as part of abuse as well? Would,
Of
would bullying
course,
fall under the umbrella of abuse?
of
Yes.
course it is. Of course it is. And children might have, or adults might, what happens is that they might push down, they might have memory issues and push down those memories, but they come back to the surface later. They can come back in the form of flashbacks, for example, or nightmares. Also, children who were not exposed to abuse themselves, but witnessed their parents fight or being abused, this also might affect them when they become adults. So, for example, I had one client who worked with me, who she herself did not experience abuse by her parents, but she used to witness her dad beating up her mom, and that affected her later as an adult. And when she became an early teen, she was a middle child. She had to protect her brother, her younger brother, who was like 6 years younger or something, from such traumatic events. She didn't want him to go through the same um, traumatic events as hers. So what she did is that when she knows that her parents are going to get involved in a conflict, she takes her younger brother to a room, and then to their room, and then she plays the music on a loud volume, and she says, "Okay, let's listen to music and dance." So you can imagine what kind of unsafe environment she lived in, and at the same time she took the role of a parent. It's the parent's role to protect a child. So imagine she was protecting her brother from her parents. So later, when she grew up as an adult, she struggled with issues like obesity, for example. She had issues with education. So like those events, those traumatic events, and the emotions that we struggle with because of them, they don't go anywhere. They just surface later. Now, if you mean by loss a child losing, or like a child losing a parent, or um, a parent passing away, this also can affect a child on a deep level. They might struggle with depression when they grow into adults, or anxiety, or they definitely will lose the sense of safety and security, and they will, this might lead them to have an unhealthy attachment style and getting involved in unhealthy relationship dynamics later when they become adults. They might also get involved in or engage in destructive behaviors, such as substance abuse, or underachievement at school. So it really does affect them when they lose when a child loses a parent when they're children. And I remember I had one more thing it also affects, or one more thing the losing a parent affects a child, is they grow, as it affects their sense of self-worth. They start to feel they are somehow inferior or less than. And that I witnessed that more than once. So, for example, I had a friend of mine who disclosed to me that she lost her mom when she was in grade 9. And she told me she never told any of the girls at school that she had lost her mom. And
Mhm.
when I asked why she did that, she said, I felt that there is something wrong with me because I had no mom. I felt less than the other girls. And I've seen that again with a friend of mine. A friend of mine lost her husband, and her daughter was in her early teens. And she told me, I found out that she didn't tell anyone at school that she lost her dad. So again, the girl, I told her yes, because she feels less than. So it also affects their self-worth.
Now, usually people would be always haunted by these, you know, hard experiences that they had in their early teens or childhood or whatever. But to what extent can you suppress that? Can you, and first of all, can you suppress those like wounds forever? Second of all, if not, for how long can you suppress them? And would it, like, be a double-edged sword later on? If you suppress it too much, would it like explode in your face later?
Yes, the mind can suppress traumatic events and push it down. And this is a survival mechanism that our mind adopts to protect us. So when an extremely traumatic event happens to us, and our mind and body feels it's too much for us, what our mind does is that it sometimes pushes down and suppresses the traumatic event, and sometimes even completely erase it from our conscious memory. And this is because, contrary to what most believe, our mind is not designed to make us happy. Our mind is designed to help us survive and protect us. So, this is why our mind reacts this way. However, this is not going to continue forever. So, at some point, especially when the person lives their life and goes around attracting events or recreating the environment in which the trauma occurred, and live the same emotions or experience the same emotions, their mind will reach a point where it would say enough is enough. So, for example, I had a client who went through a
I'm just sorry to
traumatic.
cut you off. I just want to clarify something. When you're talking about this defense mechanism and like our brain is, hardwired to protect us, not necessarily to make us happy, are you talking here about maybe our reptilian brain, like fight or flight? So, if I can't fight this problem, I'll resort to flight. I'll just run away. And is that what you're implying here?
Yes, of course. So I'll give an example of a client whom I worked with. She went through a trauma when she was 5 years old, and what happened is that her mind completely erased the trauma from her conscious mind. But what happens is our mind can succeed in repressing the event or the trauma itself, and even completely erase it from our conscious memory, that we don't remember it happening. But it cannot erase the impact of the trauma. So the impact of the trauma is still there, and it shows in several different behaviors, in emotional behaviors, in destructive behaviors. So that was what happened with her. So that trauma affected her, and affected her choices in several different aspects of or areas in her life. It affected her in her romantic relationship choices. It affected her relationship with herself, her self-image, and then it started to resurface when she was in her early 30s. And the reason is she recreated, or she was reliving the environment in which the trauma occurred. Because what happens is sometimes when we ignore the wound and we don't tend to the wound or try to heal it, yes, our mind protects us, but if we subconsciously sometimes recreate the event or recreate the environment and relive the emotions of being stuck or wanting to run away but couldn't. So this is what happened. So her mind started to give her flashbacks in her early 30s, because her mind went like, that's it. Enough is enough. We protected you long enough, and you're not doing anything about it. You're not trying to tend to this wound, so you deal with it.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
they again they can repress it, but it will always come back to the surface even after years, and
And
you
usually
can.
coming back with a vengeance.
Yes.
Yeah,
So, yeah, so you can run, but you can't hide.
absolutely. Now, you touch on a very, important point here, which is the emotional part. So, how can trauma play a role in your choice of a partner, whether you choose it correctly or incorrectly? And second of all, like, what is the role of trauma in you being faithful or unfaithful to your partner, in you engaging in many affairs or flings, which might seem like, if you just look at the surface, it might seem like, you're being unfaithful, you're cheating, but maybe it's a way to heal a wound. Can you go deeper into this part? Like, how does trauma affect your emotional life, starting with your choice of partner and how faithful or unfaithful you can be, and how vulnerable you can be to things like affairs and flings and so on?
So it does affect us on a deep level. According to the attachment theory, there are four attachment styles: secure, anxious, avoidant, and fearful avoidant. There is a study that was done, and they call this study the strange situation test. What they did is that they brought a group of 12-month-old babies with their parents, and they were systematically um, united or separated and reunited with their parents. And they were instructed to enter a lab room where there were a lot of toys on the floor for the kids to play with, and then the parents would be instructed to quietly leave the children. So the way that children reacted, 60% of the children felt upset when they recognized the parents left, but when we reunited with the parents, they were easily soothed and comforted by the parents, and they welcomed the parents coming back. This is the secure attachment style people. Now, the second group, which was 20% or less than 20%, the children were ill at ease at the beginning, and then when the parents left, they showed like extreme distress. And when the parents came back, they took a really long time to be comforted and soothed by the parents. And they also showed a behavior that suggested wanting to be comforted by the parent, but at the same time wanting to punish the parent for leaving. So those are the anxious resistant attachment. And then the third group, which from my perspective is the deeply hurted, the deeply hurt child. Those are the avoidant style group. Those children did not show much stress when separated from their parents, and when reunited with their parents, they didn't show any interest in connecting with their parents, and they even sometimes distracted themselves with the toys on the ground. Further studies showed that we connect with our romantic partners in a very similar way. So we as adults, people who have healthy relationships with their partners, those are people who have had secure attachment styles with their parents, and their parents tended to their needs consistently. Those who have an anxious attachment style, those are children who felt rejected by their parents, or their parents tended to their needs, but they were inconsistent. So the child becomes very sensitive to their parent leaving. And when they become adults, they become very sensitive to their partners changing, any sign of their partner losing attention or changing their feelings towards them. Now, and each one of them has a different wound underneath, and this is what we should try to understand. We should try to understand ourselves and understand our partners as well. So the anxious attachment people, those are people who have the rejection wound, and they are always afraid to be rejected by their partners. The avoidant people, those are people who don't who feel suffocated when their partners are too emotionally close, and they might pull back or even push their partner away when they try to become emotionally close. And those are the like the underlying wound here would be the abandonment wound. And they have both of them have trust issues actually as well, because one of them has a trust issue on whether their partner will be there for them, and the other which is the avoidant, and the anxious attachment would have a trust issue on whether their partner will meet their needs. Now, if we talk about cheating, um, one thing I also learned um, in my journey with hypnotherapy is um, intergenerational trauma. So when there is cheating in the family, there is that we can always take it back to an incident, or to cheating in the family in general. So whether from the side of the father's family or the mother's family, there might have been a repeated pattern of cheating or disloyalty from, not specifically from the parents themselves, but in the family. It might be a cousin or an uncle, or like someone in the family has that. Also, cheating is related to is we can connect it to the wound of seeking validation. So those are children, or those are people who, as children, did not get maybe enough validation from their parents, or they had to prove themselves to their parents. They needed to earn love.
Is it only
So
parents
this
here, or can it be like peers or the surroundings? Like they were not appreciated or not, like, uh, validated by their peers, by their classmates, by their, like, they were not the popular kid. They didn't get a chance to have early romance, like during their like teenage years, or like youth years. So is it only lack of validation from the parents, or even also the surroundings?
It can be either or, and both as well. So
Hmm.
it can be both of them. They will only know when they first they have to know what is their attachment style. So I recommend that anyone who's going through such experience to have an attachment style test, so they would know what attachment style they have, and they would be able to understand um, what is the underlying emotion, or what is the underlying wound uh, beyond their insecure attachment style. They can also search the family history, because, as I said, there's usually a history of that in the family. So I remember there was a book that I read right before I joined the hypnotherapy course, and it was actually one of the reasons why I joined the course and decided to study hypnotherapy. The book is called "It Didn't Start with You," and how intergenerational trauma affect us and shape who we are. So it can be also something in the family history that they can uh, that they can uh, that they can search, or try to find out more about. Um, Something else is self-awareness is very important. So when someone has a partner who cheats on them or is involved in affairs, and they want to change that about themselves, if they have enough self-awareness, this is something that can be fixed. It's not, there is nothing irreversible. So even attachment styles, it's not irreversible, but it also helps a lot for people with insecure attachment styles to try and consciously choose to be with someone with a secure attachment, because this helps them heal their attachment style faster. So studies showed that of one of four people can fix their attachment style from insecure to secure. It takes about 40 years to fix that. I believe if they are with a secure attachment style partner, this will help it. Uh, I believe it will help fix it faster. But again, self-awareness is important, understanding themselves, and the will to fix whatever underlying emotion or belief around their behavior is very important, and it helps.
So you talked about validation. So I need validation. I need someone else other than me to continuously, always tell me you're good, you're attractive, you're nice, you're smart, you're this and that. So to what extent again can trauma affect your self-esteem?
It
Is it like does it play a pivotal role in your self-esteem?
Of course it does. It plays a pivotal role in someone's self-esteem, and again, it all comes from our relationship with our parents. So, as I mentioned, children who are exposed to prolonged neglect by their parents, they learn that they are not worthy of love. So those children start to adopt coping mechanisms in order to earn love from their parents, and they what they try to do is they continuously try to seek validation from their parents, and not only from their parents, from everyone else, from their friends, from their peers at school, from their partners, and that affects their choice of partners. It's usually, and usually it is an unhealthy choice, especially if they did not do anything or take any steps towards understanding themselves and understanding their attachment style.
Now, moving to the professional side, again, how can trauma affect your performance at work, your relationship with your boss or your subordinates, or with your coworkers?
It can affect it on a deep level, and usually issues let's say issues with your boss. This is issues with people in authority. So usually issues with people in authority can be tracked back to what we call mommy or daddy issues. And when one or both parents are too controlling, or inconsistent or unpredictable, children start to associate authority or figures of authority with threat, unpredictability, inequality, and then they start to suspect all figures of authority. And this manifests in several different behavioral issues. For example, seeking autonomy or a strong sense of autonomy, or the desire to be self-directed, or resistance to figures of authority. So I had a client, for example, who had issues with figures of authority in all organizations she worked at, and she disclosed to me that wherever she worked, she had an issue with the director of the organization. And maybe at the beginning things would be fine, but then uh, something happens, or something comes up, and things start going south. And when she started taking sessions with me, it turned out that she had issues she had both mommy and daddy issues. So she growing up as a child, she felt that her mother was submissive and that her dad was too controlling. And she also felt that she was not treated fairly by her dad, even though she was the eldest child, but he favored her younger siblings over her. So this affected her professional life.
So she
Uh,
becomes
uh,
more rebellious towards authority.
yes, more rebellious and um, more distrustful. Like
Mm,
she
okay.
doesn't she doesn't trust figures of authority. She said that she has a deep disrespect for people in
Mm,
authority, and she thinks that they're unfair. They don't treat people um, under their authority with equality. So
okay.
that is yeah. So it does affect us. Also, workplace is a place where where we can be under a lot of stress, and because trauma affects our stress response. So for sure, this will show in the workplace, and it will affect our professional life and productivity. However, it doesn't always affect it in a negative way. It can sometimes affect it in a positive way. So, for example, I had a client who worked with me who was an overachiever, like a professor, doctor, uh, like a loving father, um, uh, a pastor, and he even was involved in political life in the county where he lives. And when he took sessions with me, it turned out that he had a tough childhood. His father was absent from his life as a child, whether physically or emotionally. And he even met his dad when he turned 17. That was the first time he met his dad. But having that tough childhood was actually a motivation for him to become the overachiever that he is. So sometimes it doesn't always affect us negatively. Sometimes it can affect us positively. It depends on how we um, how we deal with it or how we look at it.
How about those very extremely submissive employees who would, oh, like they're major hypocrites who would always try to, apple polish to their bosses? Like, where does that come from? And we,
So
we always see this example everywhere.
this is exactly the same thing. It's the same thing with having issues with figures of authority, but this is the other end of the spectrum. So it's also extreme. So they either become rebellious and they have issues with people in authority, or they become very submissive and very rigid, and they do whatever they are told.
How about your coworkers? Like some people are very good group members, very good team members. Others would excel if they're given an assignment to do on their own, but they would have major problems working with a group. Where does that come from as well?
I think it also depends on, it doesn't have to stem from trauma. I think it also depends on the kind of person they are. So sometimes some people excel when they work on their own. Maybe they're introverts. So it doesn't always have to be um, doesn't always have to be or to come from a trauma.
Now, if you are the boss, again, your relationship with your subordinates, whether you're like are you a leader? Are you a facilitator? Are you this extremely ferocious boss who always tends to oppress, people under him or her? Is this related again to any kind of childhood trauma or?
Of course. Yeah,
Mhm.
so such bosses or such people, they usually were raised up in an environment where they had no control. So people who are perfectionists or who are too controlling, those are people who that they were raised in an environment where they had no control. They felt they had no control over anything. So once they have control over something, this is what when they start to act this way. And sometimes they might also be narcissists. Like I of course I don't want to label anyone, but sometimes this is it. This might be what it is.
Okay, so last but not least, and because definitely there's much more to the story that, and I hope we can do a part two of this episode. But the last thing I would want to stop at here is the fact and fiction. Because there are a lot of misconceptions about hypnotherapy and hypnosis, and we usually see a lot of things in movies and plays and stories and things related to witchcraft and magicians and ghouls and whatever, and people just like hypnotizing people like that and so on, and which might scare some people off. So, what do you have to say about this? Like, what are the most common misconceptions? You, as a hypnotist, like, what are some of the most common misconceptions that you hear from people around you or even from your clients?
I remember that I was once giving a presentation, and when I introduced myself, I said that I am a hypnotist. And one of the attendees did something like this. She said, "Oh, hypnotist," and she did like that. And I said, "No, there's no such thing." So, what people don't understand is that hypnosis is a natural state of mind. So, when you are, let's say that you are watching a movie on TV, and the bell rings and you just jump, you are in a state of hypnosis. So, for example, you're driving the car and then you miss the exit. You were so consumed in your thoughts. You were in a state of hypnosis. So hypnosis is a natural state of mind. All we do in hypnosis is that as as most people know that our mind is on two levels, conscious and subconscious. The conscious mind is the critical mind. This is the overthinking mind. So what we do as hypnotists, we just come to the conscious mind and we ask it to sit aside a bit. And then we go to the subconscious and we wake it up. This is the emotional mind. So we deal with the emotional mind and then we ask the emotional mind, okay, so what happened and when and what is the interpretation that you came up with? In other words, in hypnosis, what we do is that we regress the client back to scenes or events from the past that were the root cause of the issue they are struggling with nowadays. And we help them connect to that part of themselves that went through the trauma. whether it be their 40-year-old or 8-year-old or 12-year-old, and and they look at how that part of them interpreted the trauma, because when a traumatic event happens to us, our subconscious mind doesn't recognize, there's no timeline for our subconscious with our subconscious mind. It doesn't recognize past, present, and future. So it reacts as if the traumatic event is happening now or happening again and again. It's just like a computer that didn't get a software update. So what we do is that we update it. We say, okay, we're not there now. Things changed, and you don't need to continue to adopt this coping mechanism or this survival mechanism. So that's basically or simply what hypnosis is about.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for being with us today. And it's a long story. I think we still have much more questions ahead of us. So I hope you can be with us in part two of this episode. Thank you
Hopefully.
one more time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dear viewers, if we were to recap here, so our mind is just like our body. It's we can have bruises, we can have wounds, we can have scars, and just like our body needs time to heal from any wound, so does our brain. And if the healing process is not a proper one, or if the treatment is not a proper one, then it might become chronic and acute, unfortunately. So a lot of diseases start with, like, for example, if you have some kind of cold that's not treated well, it might become some form of pneumonia, and it might become acute, and it might lead to death if it's not treated well. If the environment is not set in a proper way to treat this person. So somebody suffering from cold, but you don't protect their body, but you leave them exposed to more wind, to more cold, things might escalate. So same thing for the mind as well. You need proper treatment. And after the treatment, there is a time for healing. And there's a recovery stage. But first and foremost, the most important thing, if you want to treat any illness or disease that you have, first thing is I must admit that I have this disease, that I have this problem. Because no matter how good your physician is, without you helping the physician, he cannot treat, he cannot make proper diagnosis. So if he asks you, where is the pain? And you tell him, there's no pain. Or you point at a wrong place, you might misguide them. So first and foremost, you must admit that. And it is very, very strange that we are not ashamed to admit having physical problems, but we are ashamed to have mental problems. And having mental problems does not mean that you are a lunatic, does not mean that you need to go to an asylum, does not mean that at all. No. Like you're not crazy, you're not mad. No. It's and actually our brain is on the top of our head. Like, I think it didn't just come like that. Whether you believe in a God or you believe in Mother Nature, either way, it's at the very, very top. It is the boss. It is the boss. It is the essence of everything. So it is so ridiculous that, you would treat, the limbs, but leave the core. And your brain is the core. It is the core and the source of everything. Dear viewers, until we meet again, I hope you have a very pleasant time. Thanks for watching.